Is that working? Can you hear me? Yeah. Is that not on?
I don't know. Can everyone hear him? No.
Hello?
No.
Okay. Right, let's test this out. See if this works. Who's in the front row? The front row of the human shield for this. So this is a miniature drone. It's similar to the one that I actually work with, slightly smaller for a smaller space. And one of the things that I do is I put cameras on these. You can put other sensors as well. And it allows you to go to places and see things that you would never normally be able to see, places you couldn't access on land or even over water and that kind of thing. But if you've got sensors on them, that kind of thing, you can detect radiation in Fukushima, you can detect chemical weapons in Syria. There's so many things that you can do with these other things. I mean, you can fly around indoors, you can... sorry, I'm having too much fun at your expense. But yeah, no, these things are hugely versatile for storytelling. In terms of what I do, which is visual journalism, but in terms of, we've had data journalism previously, and the amount of data that you can collect with these things is literally opens up stories that you've never been able to tell before, stories that you've never been able to see before, so they become accessible because you can get to those places. I have got a bit of stuff on video that I can show you. I don't know if you can turn the lights down a little bit. Is that on here? I've got scene 1, 2, and 3. That thing?
Yeah.
That's scene 4. Whatever that is. Okay. So this is Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. This is the most powerful storm to ever reach landfall. And it's probably the first time on a major breaking news stories that drones are actually used to get footage. Now, I mean, here we're inside a building, and obviously we come out. What it allows you to do, the freedom that it gives you, is that you can go from something so close and local as being in the building to an overview of the entire situation. So you can immediately tell what's happening, what's going on, where there are people in need, where water's flown. This is by the coast, so the destruction you see there was actually caused by the tidal surge rather than the winds. And that ship obviously is being left there, but we can actually access through little areas which you couldn't get to on land and see things in a whole new way, really. It's really gripping, entertaining visuals, and it draws people in, gets them away from the clickbaiting stuff that you see on there, and trying to get people interested in the big news stories of the day. And compelling visuals is a big part of that. Now, so if you imagine here you're a news crew on the ground, and you're walking through this, and you've got to record with your camera on your shoulder and the microphone. How far are you likely to get through this scenario? You probably get to here. This bit of water here, you're probably not going to get any further. You wouldn't be able to tell the story of what's going on further afield. You'd know that some of the trees are down, there's a few survivors that you've met down there, and you'd be able to give that report, but you wouldn't know what was going on any further up here. But with this little drone here, we can put a camera on it and we can fly straight down there immediately on entering the country, and we find out that actually it wasn't those trees and those bits that are down that's the problem. We've got a whole community here, it's half the town of Tacloban actually, which are cut off. They're without food and water and electricity, and you just would not know that being back on the road, which you could access by foot. This allows us to investigate what's actually going on and finding out actual journalism. So it's investigative journalism in a visual way. I don't know if any of you guys were affected by the floods in the UK. I wasn't, luckily, living in London, but I got sent out to cover them. And again, we could access areas that you just couldn't get to on foot. We didn't need a boat, we didn't need to, like in the Philippines, a lot of guys were trying to get rides on helicopters and that kind of thing, and it's very difficult because to take aid off the helicopter or not take something they would normally take to get you on to take some pictures. And the pictures are important. You know, people donate money, it gains attention and all that kind of thing. Here, I had to fly up this car and check nobody was trapped inside, actually, which was something I didn't expect to be doing, some kind of search and rescue mission. They weren't, because I had no way of getting them out. They couldn't attach themselves to the drone or anything, but I would have just called the emergency services. It's not all disasters. This is flying around the Gold Cup circuit. We did a few horse race circuits, did the Grand National, and it gives people an idea of what it's like to race around. This is kind of urban sports, and again, it gives you visuals that you just wouldn't get on the budget that you're working as a day-to-day journalist. You'd need a Hollywood-style budget to get these kind of visuals just a year or two ago, and now we can get them on any news story that we go on. So there's no excuse anymore for boring, turgid videos and the rolling 24-hour news thing of just standing in front of the camera and telling people what's happening behind you. You can get out there and you can show them. And you can involve the reporter with these as well. You can do pieces to camera. I don't even know what I was doing with this building. I don't even know what it was. I just found it when I was doing the floods and flew around. So this is conservation. This was in France, and it's actually wolf conservation. We went out with a group of wolf hunters who were going to go and shoot some of these wolves that are apparently killing the livestock. So we had 50 experts, people that know the land, the lay of the land. We had wolf trackers, all those guys, and we went out on foot, and we didn't see a thing. We didn't find a single wolf. We saw nothing. We had some tracks in the ground, and that was it. And the next day we went out flying this around without the hunters, and we found these animals running through the trees, which we're pretty sure are wolves. I mean, we're not experts, and we didn't fly down low enough to kind of identify them, but we think we found them in the trees when all the experts kind of failed, and we couldn't take the drone out with the experts because we would be increasing their capabilities. So I didn't want to fly over something, say, there's the wolf, and then the guy shoots it, and that's our story. You know, the idea was their hunt and how successful they were. I didn't want to be like the guy just saying, there it is, shoot it, you know. So it's an interesting dilemma that suddenly you're bringing in a whole new capability to any kind of story that you're covering. And in the Philippines, we were discovering the bodies of victims. One of the things I thought it'd be useful for was search and rescue, but unfortunately it was actually the bodies of victims that we were finding, something I hadn't anticipated beforehand that it would be useful for. And then we could highlight where they are and tell the aid agencies who could then go in and collect those and return them to their loved ones. So there's so many different things that we haven't even discovered yet that we can use these things for. And yeah, time lapses, we've got ones now that fly for a huge amount of time. This is kind of breaking news. This isn't out yet. This is coming out later this week. On the left is 6 months later, and on the right is immediately after the storm. And what you get is a comparison of how the rebuilding effort is working, what's changed. It gives you a kind of a visual journalism of how things have changed in the 6 months since the storms arrived. So here you can see the ships are still there. I have no idea how they're going to solve that problem. And they've started building these kind of temporary accommodation, but it looks temporary to us, but that is where they're going to live. That is their kind of permanent houses. This is the kind of slum area of Tacloban by the sea, and they're not allowed to rebuild there, but obviously, as you can see, it's completely full. They're just ignoring the advice not to build by the sea, and we're entering the new typhoon season. I think next month it starts, so they're kind of all holding their breath. I won't make you watch it again. So that's what we can do with these devices. Now, one of the questions I get asked is how much range, how far can they go? The helicopter ones have less range at the moment than a fixed-wing aircraft, so you could probably get 3 or 4, 5 miles out with a helicopter. I'm currently building a load of fixed-wing aircraft that I'm hoping to get up to 100 miles, which is 100 miles distance from me, so you'd need to at least do 200 miles if you wanted to get it back, which I do generally. But one of the interesting ways, the way you fly them is you get the footage live back from the aircraft. So if you are 100 miles away, you're still sat there with a pair of goggles on or a little screen, and you're flying it as if you're the pilot on that plane, which is 100 miles away. So you can actually decide what you're filming. You can choose different things to actually concentrate on, ignore other things. It's not just a drone where you put a GPS chip in it and send it on its way and then go for breakfast and then stand outside the hotel. Although that is a possibility that I've been working on as well. But people always think that these things are kind of autonomous. And most of the time it's much better to have a pilot that's tracking through the debris or controlling the story so you know what to kind of shoot out for. But the other question I get asked a lot is privacy. Are we going to invade privacy? This is a terrible thing. I'm a photojournalist, so I started out with still cameras. I still do that. Now, if I wanted to invade someone's privacy, I would use a long lens. These things are really noisy, relatively low range in terms of distance you can fly away from yourself at the moment, especially if you're trying to fly at bedroom height or something to shoot through a window or something like that. So the privacy issue is a non-starter for me, and there are already laws that catch you on if you're trying to use it for untoward means of finding out what some celebrity is up to, or Rihanna's wedding, or whatever it is. So I don't think that's a massive issue. The main issue, which has never been asked, which I found, which we mentioned earlier, was the one of increasing people's capabilities. So if you take this out with an army or something like that in a war zone, and you fly up and immediately find the bad guys, and then they shoot those bad guys, you've kind of caused the deaths of those people that you just found. So that, for me, is the kind of main issue at the moment I'm kind of dealing with. I don't know if you guys got any questions?
So I was wondering the legal aspects of, image. Right, so I was wondering about the legal aspects of putting a drone in, British aerospace.
Yeah, good question. There are lots of laws. You have to do a series of exams. You have to do ground exams, theory exams, flight exams, practical exams. You hand in a what's called an operations manual, which is your kind of safety remit. It's about 60 pages long, which details how you fly. And then there are certain, even with all of that, there are certain restrictions. So you're 400 feet high. You can't go further than 500 meters away from where you are on the ground. And then you can't fly over crowds of 1,000 people, and a huge ream of laws I won't bore you with now, but there are plenty of restrictions, certainly in UK airspace for commercial use of these things. So you can't just fly over Buckingham Palace or something like that.
So one question, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So who would be sort of like eligible? Who would be eligible to actually sort of like use that for your machine?
In terms of?
It's kind of storage to
well, anybody that's kind of capable of flying them. It took me about 3 years to kind of get the flight skills together, and a similar kind of time to learn the technicals behind it, because I build all of my own drones. So it took quite a few years to learn the technicals. And if you're going away to somewhere like the Philippines, you need to know what everything does on that device, because you can guess when you get there the thing doesn't work, and you've got to kind of rebuild that thing and make it work, or if something goes wrong with one of the propellers, you have to switch some parts around. So you need to know the technicals, and then in order to fly through safely through proximity and know how it flies, you've got to spend a few years kind of practicing that.
One other question, sorry. Do you have to sort of is it charged up, or is it,
good question, yeah, batteries. I use rechargeable batteries on mine. We can get anywhere between possibly an hour and a half to down to 10 minutes, depending on what kind of flight system, what kind of payloads you're flying, that kind of thing. It's always a balance between the weight of the aircraft. You can't just stick all your HD cameras on it and everything, and then the flight time. And even increasing batteries increases the weight, so then you have to balance. There's a law of diminishing returns, beyond which point you're actually getting less flight time for carrying more battery. So there's quite a lot of technicals behind balancing what you want to do on a particular flight or on a particular job. Which is where the fun is in hacking these things apart and creating a machine that nobody's created before to get somewhere that nobody's seen before, or do something that nobody's done.
There's one right in the back there.
Hi. So I don't want you to think this as like a big criticism, but I think it's really cool. I was interested to hear your response about the image is gone now, but I just wanted to know why you think a bird's eye view, the truth from that perspective is more informative or better for journalism than the truth from the ground.
Yeah, no, absolutely, good question. It's not a replacement for any other kind of journalism. It's an addition. It's another tool in my bag. So I shot pictures on the ground, I shot video from the ground, I interviewed people, as well as flew over it. So it's not to replace everything else, but it's another tool. So if you want to show the scale of it, you can immediately get up there and show the scale of it. If you want to reach an area that you can't get to and find out what's going on over there, you can immediately fly over there. If you want to put in some GPS coordinates, film something then, go back 6 months later, put in the same coordinates and film exactly the same again, and merge the two things together, you can get an accurate comparison of the rebuilding. Although I actually didn't do that, I had to line everything up manually and fly the equivalent path. But there are so many things you can do. And one of the things actually we noticed was when you flew up, you could see where the tidal damage ended and the storm damage began. So you can see, which on the ground was actually quite difficult, everywhere just looked destroyed. But when you got up, you can see, yeah, we can see the flow the water took, the path that it took. I don't know whether that's interesting for the journalists, interesting for the people, or interesting for scientists to see how the water flies in, the direction the trees fell in, showing the way the water flows. It's the same in the UK as well. You can see where the fields are flooded, where the water flows, that kind of thing. So in terms of the disaster stories, it gives you a new perspective, but it doesn't replace the journalism on the ground. You still got to meet the people on the ground, you've got to speak to the people and the faces and that kind of thing. It's just another perspective.
Just when you talk about range, do you mean transmission range or flight range? And if it's transmission, is it all like radio, or do you ever think of satellites, like I guess the military must use?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on a lot of things to improve range. One of the things that's limiting at the moment is literally the battery life.
Yeah.
So if you've got to get an aircraft 100 miles out and 100 miles back with some kind of payload, whether it's a camera or some other sensor, then you need to power all of that. So you've got to take a battery on board, you've got to charge all that up and make sure the battery's not too heavy. So that's the one limiting factor of the range. The other one, like you mentioned, is the transmission range. So if you're getting live video back, you've got to send the signal from the aircraft down to the ground. But to control it, you need to send your control signal from the ground back to the aircraft. So you've got two competing transmissions going through. So you have to use different frequencies for both of them, and it's hard to use a high gain antenna, so it's going to get a bit technical, on the aircraft, because a high gain antenna powers everything down a tiny corridor. If that's on the aircraft and you're turning around, you're not going to be in the corridor to receive that transmission. So you have to have what's called an omnidirectional antenna, which shoots everything in multiple directions, which isn't as high powered, and then on the ground you have to have a huge antenna to collect that signal because it's very weak. Whereas your control signal, you can beam straight to the aircraft with a high gain antenna to maintain the control. But the other way of doing it is have no control whatsoever, put it on GPS, send it out there with none of the video signal coming back, none of the control signals going out. That way you're not limited by your transmission range, only your kind of battery range. But when you're doing that, obviously you're limited by what it's going to see. You're kind of taking a shot in the dark and hoping it's going to film something you're interested in. Yeah.
Thanks, Lewis. I was just wondering, given your comments on battery life, what you thought about the potential for drones as a delivery mechanism. You've got Jeff Bezos and Amazon reportedly doing drone next day deliveries. Do you think you could see paperboys replaced by drones, only delivering the Telegraph?
It was quite funny actually. The Mail wanted me to deliver a Daily Mail when that story came out. Via drone as an idea, but the Amazon thing was a huge PR stunt. That's what that was. Was it like Cyber Tuesday, one of these American things? And they were like, "Oh, we haven't really prepared anything. Okay, we'll do drone deliveries. Mention that. That'll get." And then everybody was, and still are talking about it. So it was great work by the PR team. But I don't think the PR team knocked on the door of the technical team and found out whether any of this stuff would actually be possible. Now, I think they were saying that they'd deliver them within like 2 minutes, or they had some really tight time schedule, which means these things will be doing 120 miles per hour, crisscrossing the skies of America. Now, I mean, I live in a block of flats, so I have no idea how they're going to land. I don't have any outdoor space. I'm waiting for my delivery, you know, I don't know how they're going to get it into me. And you can imagine there's so many other problems with just sending something out to a location and hoping it can land and drop off whatever it is. And I'm struggling just to carry the batteries and the small camera. If you've if you've ordered a weights bench or your new bench pressing device, and you say, yeah, Amazon, I'm expecting that, it's going to be a Chinook or something that's going to happen. So I look forward to the day that it happens, but they announce it slightly prematurely, I would say.
You mentioned it makes a lot of noise, and obviously like drones are pretty novel at the moment. How much progress has there been in making less intrusive drones for like filming crowds and things, where you're not going to get everyone to start looking at the drone?
Part of that actually comes from the development of cameras. So since we've had mobile phones, camera developers have been making smaller and smaller cameras. Before mobile phones, no one was interested in the size of cameras. And suddenly when they realised we can stick one of these into a camera, into a phone, they got smaller and smaller and smaller. And with that, we can now shoot HD footage with our iPhone with a tiny little camera, which means you can stick a tiny little camera on a device like this, and then it's completely unobtrusive, difficult to fly in the wind. But so the camera technology helps you keep the drone size down and keeps everything small and simple and less obtrusive. If you're carrying something like a Red Epic, which Hollywood would fly, then you've got to get one of these octocopter 8-bladed things, and it's huge, and you don't want to go near it and take your fingers off and all that kind of thing. So it's really to do with how big your payload is how obtrusive your kind of drone is. And in terms of keeping them less obtrusive, it's quite difficult. It's the laws of physics. I mean, technology can't be the laws of physics, so you're going to have the propellers that have got to lift the device, and the speed of the propeller is based on how much lift you need to lift the weight, that kind of thing. So.
But in terms of even that being very small, it produces a lot of noise, right?
Size of drone. No, I don't think anybody's kind of working towards that yet. I think we're still struggling with the noisy ones and trying to make them do the things that we want to do. In terms of, I've got a completely silent one, which is the aircraft, which we can just switch the motor off and you can glide. So if you wanted to fly it up to a few thousand feet and secretly fly over something without them noticing, you probably could. And you cut it out the shape of a bird, and that bird will trace across the sky, and then it'll get somewhere near the right, and then start and fly off, and then they'll know what you were doing. So yeah, there's a few things in that I'm working on in terms of but not in terms of the helicopters. Even the US military, have you heard of Chinook? They can't quieten the big helicopters down, and they've got all the budget in the world, so in my front room I'm more limited than they are.
Yeah.
Are you using a GoPro camera? If so, which one? And secondly, can you program the drone to fly along, so can you store the trajectory and get the drone to fly along that exact same trajectory for a second time?
Yeah, you can. You can store trajectories, you can store kind of GPS coordinates, height, all that kind of thing. You can send it off on what's called waypoints, and it'll fly across through all the waypoints, return to you, and if you said do it again, it'll do it again. And you could email those waypoints to somebody else, and they could come there and they could fly exactly the same course. And this has got useful things for farming and things like that, because when you're traversing a set of fields and you want to know where the best crops are growing, how the light's hitting them, where the water is, where the fertile soil is, what's working, what isn't working, you have to trace a really boring route, zigzagging up and down a load of fields. So if you can just say, go and do that for me, and then you open your flask, have a cup of tea, let the thing do the work, and then it lands, and you've got all the data that you need, and then you go and process all of that. And then the next guy comes in the office, you can't make the job in 6 months' time to go and see those fields, but you've got a young guy in the office, but he's never been up there, you hand him the coordinates, he goes up there, and this thing can retrace. So it is possible, yeah.
Did you do that in the before and after shots of the...
No, I didn't, because I didn't know I would be going back. And so I flew and thought I was just concentrating on the footage, and when I went back, I was, how are we going to line this up? So I flew manually, Fiona was holding a laptop, and I was watching the other footage, and then just trying to retrace the exact flight. But if I'd known that I was going back 6 months ago, I might have put in some kind of coordinates and had it a bit easier.
You didn't answer which camera it was.
Oh, camera. I use GoPros all the time. I've got a lot of GoPros. I've got a lot of other cameras as well. The great thing about the GoPro obviously is the weight, the size, and it's great footage. It's HD, or even better than HD, 2.7K. But it has a fisheye effect. So, one thing you do is take some pliers, pull the lens off. It feels a bit bad when you get a brand new camera. I rip it apart, you get a board lens that they use for engineering off the internet. You can slide that in, you get slightly less wide-angled lens, but you don't get that kind of curved horizon. So you can hack the camera apart and get a different kind of focal length and a more professional-looking kind of footage. You can do it in software as well, but you get blurred edges when you do that. So, but I do use a lot of GoPros.
I have a question, if you don't mind. Maybe it's a cheeky one, but at what point in your career did you start playing with drones, and at what point did the Telegraph decide to employ you to do it for them?
I probably 4 or 5 years ago, I started playing around with the drones. This was, I think they weren't even called drones. We were just radio-controlled helicopters, and it was just getting a kit from the hobby store and taking a camera to it and flying that, and then realising I didn't know how to fly a helicopter, crashing into the field multiple times, and then learning how to fly that, and I think maybe an aeroplane is better, getting there, and then it just went on and on and on. And it's only recently, actually, with the advent of the gimbals. Now the gimbal holds the camera at the front, and the drone is GPS controlled, so that if the wind's blowing it flies into the wind, that kind of thing. So the drone could be at 45 degrees just to fly into the wind to stay in the same position. You don't want your camera at 45 degrees, so you have to have a gimbal at the front, which is then level to the ground, and it's got gyro stabilizers in it, which keeps the camera safe. So you shake the helicopter around and the camera stays still. So it's only since that's happened that you don't feel seasick when you watch all this stuff with all of it. So it's only in the last probably year that this has become big, mainly because the gimbals allow you to have all the stable footage now.
I think we've got time for 2 more quick ones.
Two quick answers. First one, have you ever experimented with Oculus Rift as a kind of
With the what?
Oculus Rift?
Yeah, I've got Oculus Rift, yeah.
And second one, has it ever gone down?